Okay, think about this for a second. Pencils, erasers, sharpeners, these are just ordinary, everyday things. But could you ever imagine that a company making these simple items could cause such a massive stir in the market? We're talking about a company that's leaving industry giants totally in the dust.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Today, we're going to dive deep into the world of the Indian stationery business to try and uncover this secret formula for success. And to do that, we're going to use a super powerful lens, Jim Collins's famous book, Good to Great. So, our mission today is pretty clear. To figure out how, in this super crowded market, some companies, especially DOMS, didn't just stay good, but actually started on that journey to becoming great.
So, how in the world did they do it? How does a company that sells everyday school supplies manage to become a market titan? Well, that's the big puzzle we're going to solve together in this explainer.
Now, before we really jump in, there's this core idea from good to great that is just fascinating. It's called the flywheel effect. The idea is that huge success isn't some single aha moment. There's no one magical product launch or some big press announcement. Instead, picture this. It's like pushing a giant, heavy wheel. Those first few turns are incredibly hard, right? But with consistent effort, always pushing in the same direction, it slowly starts to pick up speed. And eventually, its momentum becomes absolutely unstoppable.
So, to get that flywheel spinning, Collins gives us this amazing framework, and it's broken down into three big parts. First up, you've got disciplined people. This is all about getting the right people on the bus before you even decide where you're going. Second, there's disciplined thought, confronting the cold, hard facts and then figuring out the one thing you can be the absolute best at. And finally, disciplined action, turning that one big thought into consistent, repeated action. Put them all together, and that's how you get the flywheel moving. So, let's dive into that first pillar, disciplined people. Collins argues, and I think he's right, that this is the absolute starting point. It all begins with the people.
And the very first principle here is something he calls level 5 leadership. It almost sounds like a level in a video game, right? And in a way, it kind of is. It's the highest level of leadership you can get to. It's this wild mix of two things that seem like complete opposites. On one hand, you have this deep personal humility, and on the other, an absolute ironclad professional will. These are not the celebrity CEOs you see on magazine covers. Nope. They're the ones working quietly, diligently, behind the scenes.
And you know what? We see fantastic examples of this right in the stationery business. The leaders at DOMS, famously low profile. Their focus isn't on giving splashy interviews. It's on strengthening their distribution network street by street. Same thing with the promoters of Hindustan pencils, the folks who make Nataraj and Apsara. They just quietly focus on being the best at manufacturing, not publicity. Their work does the talking. And get this, even at Camlin, when the Japanese company Kikuyo took over, the family leadership humbly stepped back for professional management, putting the company's future way ahead of their own ego. That's level 5.
So you've got a great leader, but they can't do it alone. And that brings us to the next principle. First, who, then what? Collins says, don't figure out where to drive the bus first. No, first you get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus, and then get the right people into the right seats. Only then do you figure out where you're all going. DOMS basically made this their culture. They built a powerful team of distributors and partners before they even thought about flooding the market with new stuff.
All right, so now that we have the right people on the bus, how should they think? Well, that brings us right to our second pillar, disciplined thought. The first part of this is about confronting the brutal facts, and it's known as the Stockdale Paradox. It's named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. He noticed something really interesting. The most optimistic prisoners, the ones who kept saying, oh, we'll be out by Christmas, they were the first ones to break. The paradox is this. You have to confront the most brutal, harsh facts of your current reality, no matter what they are. But at the exact same time, you have to hold on to this unwavering faith that you will prevail in the end. It's a tough balance, but it's crucial.
So, what were the brutal facts of the stationery market? Well, for a company like DOMS, it was that the market is just incredibly crowded, brand loyalty is basically non-existent, and customers are extremely sensitive to price. For a legacy brand like Hamlin, the brutal fact was that they were just losing their cool factor with kids and teenagers who were all choosing the slick packaging of DOMS. Facing these hard truths head-on was the very first step. Okay, now for the really fun part of disciplined thought, the hedgehog concept. It's based on this old story about a fox and a hedgehog. See, the fox knows a ton of clever tricks to try and catch the hedgehog. But the hedgehog knows one big thing: how to defend itself by rolling into a spiky ball. And guess what? Every single time, the hedgehog wins. Collins says great companies need to stop trying to be clever foxes and instead find their one big thing.
So how do you find your hedgehog? You've got to find where the answers to 3 crucial questions overlap. First, what can you realistically be the absolute best in the world at? Second, what drives your economic engine? Like, what's the one key metric you can focus on to generate the most profit? And third, what are you and your team deeply, truly passionate about? Right in the middle of those 3 circles, that's where you'll find your hedgehog concept.
And what's so cool about this slide is how clearly you can see the super focused strategies of all the major players. For DOMS, their hedgehog was mass premium student stationery. This was just brilliant because it basically created a whole new category. It wasn't cheap and unbranded, but it wasn't super expensive either. Kokuyo Camelin used its long history to become the best in creativity-based stationery with trust. ITC Classmate, they use their huge corporate power to just dominate mass-produced high-quality notebooks. And Hindustan Pencils stuck to what they do best, being the absolute master of efficient, low-cost pencil manufacturing, making them unbeatable on price. But look, having a great idea is one thing. It's not enough. You have to translate that thought into action. And this is where our third pillar, disciplined action, becomes so incredibly important.
Now, when we say discipline, we're not talking about strict rules and a culture of fear. Not at all. It's about creating a framework of freedom and responsibility. It means you have disciplined people with disciplined thought who are then empowered to take disciplined action. It's really the opposite of a bureaucracy. It's about finding what works and just rinsing and repeating. A perfect example is the Beat Planet DOMS. A salesperson has a fixed route and has to visit the exact same shops on the same day every single week. That simple discipline builds incredible consistency and trust, which is way more valuable than just chasing random sales.
And this right here, this is how all those pieces, the right people, the right thinking, and the right actions, all come together to create that unstoppable flywheel we talked about at the very beginning.
Let's just walk through the DOMS flywheel step by step. It's not rocket science, it's just a simple cycle of disciplined actions. It starts with that sales beat discipline. Because the salesperson shows up like clockwork, the shopkeeper knows exactly when to order, which guarantees step 2, range availability. Because the products are always in stock, the shopkeeper puts them out on the shelves, not in the back room, which leads to step 3, high visibility. And hey, what you see is what you buy, right? That's step 4, faster rotation. Fast-selling products make the retailer happy, and that builds step 5, retailer trust. Now, because that retailer trusts DOMS, they'll easily accept new products. That's step 6. And all of this leads to the final step, higher shelf share. Then the whole cycle starts all over again, but with more and more force each time. See? Unstoppable.
Now, this all sounds great, but it also sounds slow, patient. In today's world of go startups, does a model like this actually work? Well, the numbers. The numbers tell the whole story.
Let's just take a look at market capitalization. DOMS is valued at over 15,000 crore rupees. Now, compare that to Flair Writing at around 3,100 crore and Kokuyo Camelin at just 870 crore. The difference is it's staggering.
And it's not just about being big. Let's look at how efficient they are with a metric called Return on Capital Employed, or ROCE. It basically shows how well a company is making profits on its money. DOMS has an ROCE of over 26%. Flair is at about 15.6%, and Camelin is at a tiny 3.65%. I mean, these numbers just scream whose flywheel is truly spinning and creating real, sustainable value.
So at the end of the day, the story of DOMS isn't some kind of miracle. It's a living, breathing case study of the good to great principles in action. From the quiet leadership working behind the curtain to that slowly accelerating flywheel, it just proves that greatness isn't something that just happens to you. It's not about luck or circumstance. It is the result of conscious, disciplined choices made over and over and over again.
You know, our whole discussion today was about companies, but as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. Do these principles, especially that hedgehog concept, only apply to businesses? Or could we, as individuals, apply them to our own careers, to our own lives? Can each of us find our own hedgehog concept to go from good to great? That's a question worth thinking about.